All right, ladies and gents, this is the second version, the witness account according to the Maid. What the Maid heard. Around 7 o'clock, I went upstairs to put on my new uniform. I gotta stop this, I can't do this accent. Reverend Truelove, old Mr. Archibald and his son, and a famous lady novelist were joining the weekend guests for dinner, so it was a formal occasion. As I got to the top of the stairs, I heard angry voices coming from Mrs. Horsehair's room, and guessed that Mrs. Horsehair and her niece were having one of their rows. I tried not to listen, but couldn't help catching one phrase very distinctly. Mrs. Horsehair shouted, "If you marry him, you stupid little fool, it'll cast you off without a penny." Then the door burst open, and Miss Daphne rushed out. She ran straight to her room and slammed the door. I came downstairs again, about 15 minutes later, and heard Mr. Jeffrey talking on the telephone in the hall. I tried not to listen, but couldn't help hearing one or two phrases. "Can't you wait a little bit longer? The old woman is so damned mean with her money." There was a long pause, and then he said, "I will find the money somehow," and slammed the receiver down. I guess he was talking to one of his gambling companions. Mr. Jeffrey is very fond of roulette, but his mother disapproves and tries to prevent him gambling by keeping him short of money. From 7:15 till 8 o'clock, I was in the kitchen preparing the food, but I peeped out to watch the guests arrive. Young Mr. Archibald looked dashing in a blue velvet suit. Dinner was at 8 o'clock, and as soon as I came in with the soup, I noticed things weren't going too well. Dame Christie and Myrtle Barry seemed to be getting on quite well, discussing some murders in great detail. But Mr. Jeffrey looked like thunder, and young Mr. Archibald looked terribly unhappy. He's passionately in love with Miss Daphne, you know. Daphne looked like she was about to cry, and the actress Miss Honey looked a little annoyed as well. This might have been because her and Miss Daphne were wearing exactly the same dress, or it might have been because her companion, Mr. Oscarson, and Mrs. Horsehair were having a very intimate conversation at one end of the table. Reverend Truelove and old Archibald tried to keep the conversation going, but it was quite a relief when dinner broke up at about 9 o'clock. The ladies then retired to the parlor for coffee, and the gentlemen went to the billiard room. I served coffee and then went back to the kitchen to clear up. At about 9:45, I went into the parlor to collect the coffee cups, and as I crossed the hall, I overheard loud voices in the ballroom. I tried not to listen, but it sounded very like Miss Honey. Suddenly the door opened, and Mrs. Horsehair came out. She looked rather embarrassed on seeing me, and said, "Oh, Charlotte, I was looking for my book. Do you know where it might be?" I said that I hadn't seen it, and she muttered something about looking in the library and made off in that direction. I went into the parlor, where I found Dame Christie, Myrtle Barry, and old Mr. Archibald deep in conversation. They were still talking about murder. I couldn't help listening. It made me feel quite cold, so I collected up the cups as slowly as I could. As I was doing this, I heard a door slam in the hall, followed by the sound of footsteps crossing the hall. Then the front door slammed. I finished collecting the cups and went out into the hall, but no one was there. I started to cross the hall to the kitchen. Suddenly, I heard a piercing scream. It came from the library. I couldn't move. I tried to call for help, but couldn't make a sound. The kitchen door opened, and Velvet, the butler, came running out. He looked at me in astonishment. I gasped, "The library!" And then I fainted.